Hello, this is Aaron Maller from Parallax, and this quick video is going to go over the theory and the setup of the object style numbers versus the line weights that we include in every template that we build. To start, you're probably familiar with the fact that Revit uses a system of basically 16 numbers, 1 to 16, that then get line weights at specific scales. This means that if we go into Manage and we go down to line weights, there is a table where the numbers 1 to 16 are present, and every different scale that you potentially may want to add in can have specific line weights that correspond to all of these 16 numbers. Now, that's most of the stuff that everybody's already aware of, and so if you go into the table called Object Styles, you'll see here that every item that we put in the model can basically have a number for when it's in the distance and a number for when it's cut. For instance, in our template, when walls are shown in the distance, they use an object style of 4, and we'll discuss why in a few minutes, and if the wall is cut, it uses a line weight of 7. Now, what most people don't realize is that when you're looking at object styles, you're not seeing any controls for which number the surface patterns of the objects use. The projection lines are all of the lines around the perimeter and the border of these objects, and the cut lines are the borders and the different layer lines when things get cut. But as an example, if we were to go to an exterior elevation and we were to look at the patterns that are showing up on the walls, so the pattern of the stone and the pattern of the panels that are on the side of the building and the pattern of the brick. Well, there's nowhere inside your view controls in Revit where you can actually override the surface pattern line weights of an object. So for instance, if we grab walls and we go into the surface pattern overrides, you'll see that you can change the patterns and you can change the color, but you cannot change the line weight of any surface pattern of any object. That's because all surface patterns are automatically set to the object style number of 1. So the only way you can actually control the line weights of surface patterns in every drawing in your file is if you go into the line weight table and adjust the number 1, that is driving the line weight of all of your surface patterns. So as an example, you'll see here that it's on 001. If we do something crazy like change it to 0.02, you'll see that all the line weights on the surface patterns only are going to get considerably bigger. Now we're going to undo that, of course. So here's where that gets a little more complicated. That means that effectively object style 1 is reserved. Now if we were to go back in to the object style table, if anything else in this table was also using a number 1, that would mean that you have no way to adjust surface pattern line weights because you would automatically be adjusting the line weights of something else. What this means is that we're going to consider the object style number 1 as being reserved. Now you'll notice in this particular chart that we have also said that the object style for number 2 is reserved. So keep in mind, these were decisions that were made when Revit was originally built. None of this is decided by Parallax, none of this was necessarily our choosing. When we looked at the exterior elevations, we said all surface patterns were categorized under object style number 1. That's true with one exception, and that exception is the surface patterns of ceilings. Similarly, if you were to go into an RCP and you were to say, I would like to override the ceilings, you'll see here that again, when you go into pattern, you can override the color, but you cannot affect the line weight in any way. Similarly, if we were to grab the ceiling and we were to say, let's override the graphics in its view, here, again, you'll notice that on the surface patterns, you can only affect color and pattern. You cannot affect their actual line weights. Again, we know that if we were to go into the line weight table and look at number 2, that is where ceilings are reserved. So similarly here, if we're at 0.003 and we do something silly again and we change it to a much bigger number, you'll see that all of the ceiling patterns get considerably darker. Now we're going to undo that again. What this means is that we want to consider object styles 1 and 2 as reserved. That way you have some flexibility to be able to modify the line weight of your surface patterns in elevations and your surface patterns in reflected ceiling plans. And the way that we do that is we basically don't use object styles number 1 and number 2 for anything in this file. Essentially, that means that number 3, for the most part, will be our lightest line weight. The way that looks is that, in general, we are going to use a system where we make the items in the distance use object styles 3 and 4. For the most part, there are some exceptions. And then we'll use the object styles 6 and 7 for objects that are cut by the view. This isn't a perfect science. There will sometimes be projection lines that are 5s, and there will sometimes be cut lines that are 5s. But in general, if we stick to 3 and 4 for objects that are in the distance, and we stick to objects 6 and 7, that means that we will have some decent line weight differences between things in the distance and things that are cut. And it also means that we've now avoided numbers 1 and numbers 2. This does mean, of course, that if you were to go and review the actual line weights themselves, you would see something like this in the line weight values. We're going to start with our lightest line weight at number 3, and of course our darkest object will be somewhere near line weight 7. Line weights 1 and 2 may be close to equivalent to 3 or 4. They may also change slightly depending on how dark you want your surface patterns to be. From there, we do have some lines that use the object styles 8, 9, 10, and 11, which do get considerably darker line weights. For the most part, those will be things like diagrams, potentially site plans, and areas where we need other considerably darker lines to be shown. But in general, we'll have 5 different line weights for things that are actually drawn in the model, and then again, some additional darker line weights for things like diagrams. Now, when we show this diagram to people, usually their next question is, well, Revit goes all the way up to 16, so what are we doing with 12 to 16? For that, one of the important things that we like to bring up is that you may remember that if we went to the line weight table itself, that each line weight, like number 3, can change how thick the lines are actually drawn at different scales. So an object that is 0.0030 inches at quarter inch may be 0.0040 inches at inch and a half. We may want it to be a slightly darker line weight. The issue is, we sometimes model or draw things where we want the line weights to be perfectly consistent, even if the views are at different scales. A great example is break lines that happen in enlarged plans, wall sections, and section details. The scale of those views could be anywhere from 1/4 of an inch all the way up to 3 inches equals a foot. Well, if we use a line weight 3 through 7, and we have those line weights changing size at the different scales, it means that if you have a 3-inch detail next to a 1/4 inch enlarged plan, your break lines could have different thicknesses on the sheet, which can look like somebody actually made a mistake. Because of that, in the Parallax environment, we have implemented a special series of extra line weights called the consistent line weights. Basically, line weights or object styles 12 through 16 do pretty closely emulate the exact line weights of 3 through 7. The difference here is that if you go back into the line weight table, you'll see that line weight 16 is completely consistent across all scales. That's true all the way back to number 12 as well. Now, it isn't a perfect science because, again, since line weight 3 does change as you go across the table, we had to pick which variant of line weight 3 we wanted to use for line weight 12. But you'll see here that 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, again, pretty closely emulate what we have for the object style 3 through 7 line weights, except that they are completely consistent across all scales. In general, there's not a whole lot for the staff to really know, other than 3 is technically the lightest object style line weight, and they work their way from there. The only time that it actually gets confusing is that there are also detail lines that they may choose to draw in the project, and there are model lines as well. And that's where, if you were to go in to the line styles, not the line weights, here is where we're setting up line styles that the project teams can actually draw or model with. One thing is opinions vary on if the lightest line should actually be numbered 3, which of course tracks with the explanation that we're giving here. But for folks who don't know the intricacies of Revit, they may be confused as to why there is not a number 1. So it's a pretty simple system. For lines that they're drawing or modeling with, they do still use the numbers 0, 1 to 0, 5. What that means is the line style that is called 0, 1 uses the line weight object style of 3. Similarly, the one that is called 05 uses the object style of 07. Again, you can see this if you go into the line styles table, because you'll see here that all of the lines that are called 01 are using line weight 3. When you get into the larger ones, which again are for diagram purposes only, you'll see that there is an 8, 9, 10, and 11 for 6, 7, 8, and 9. These number 10s, of course, are now gone in current versions of the template because number 12 has now become part of what we call the consistent line weights. So this is the reason that we avoid using object styles 1 and 2 in the template. And so if you were to go through the object style table, again, you'll see that most things are 3 and 4 for projection. Most things are 5, 6, and 7 for cut line weights. You will occasionally find some things that are still set to number 1 in any given file. Generally what that means is it's something that was not available in Revit a year or two ago, and Autodesk has now made it available, and we need to just do a quick pass through the object style table to update those numbers. For instance, furniture and furniture systems were not cuttable until recently, and so when they create a new category availability, it defaults to 1, and we just go back through and fix it. So that's basically how the object styles and the line weights are set up in all the variants of templates that we build here.